Good morning to all, and may I on behalf, first of all, good morning and welcome to the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investment Division, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company Limited, as well as members of the media and the public. The Committee on Public Accounts Enterprises has a mandate to consider and report to the House on A, the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of all enterprises that are owned or controlled by or on behalf of the state. B, the Auditor General's report on any such accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements. And finally, C, whether policy is carried out efficiently, effectively, and economically, and whether expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to examine the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company Limited for the period 2012 to 2017. Our committee is desirous of hearing about the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at this company in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to help, I want to emphasize, to help the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company Limited improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. The meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. At this time, I'd like to introduce members of the committee that is before you. But before I do so, let me invite the officials of the Investments Division, followed by the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones to please introduce themselves, to be followed ultimately by the members of this committee. Yeah. So can I invite, first of all, members of the Investment Division to introduce themselves?
Good morning, everyone. I am Chintamani Suku, Acting Director, Investments Division.
Good morning. My name is Sita Bidesi, Business Analyst, Acting.
Good morning. Nisa Charaman, Senior Audit Analyst, Central Audit Committee.
Can I now invite the Ministry of Trade and Industry?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Frances Signore, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning, Chairman, members. Randall Karam, the Director of Policy in the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning, Dennis Scott, Senior Business Analyst.
Good morning. My name is Videsh Maraj, Acting Senior Economist at the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Thank you very much. My name is Wade Mark, Chairman of the PAEC. I will now invite my colleagues on furthest to my right to introduce himself, followed by the Honorable Jennifer Batiste afterwards.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am Jennifer Batiste Primus, and I'm a member of this committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to everyone. Foster Cummings, committee member.
Good morning, everyone. Amrita Deunarain, committee member.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. I am Karen Tomiu Jardine, Chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Esther Legendre, Director.
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Anastasia Samuel James, Consultant Administration, Trinidad and Tobago Free Zone.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Mohammed, Director.
May I at this time invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Trade and Industry to make a brief opening statement.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members all of the committee, colleagues, Ministry of Finance. The Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones program was designed, as you are aware, to encourage local and foreign investment in export-driven projects that create jobs, develop skills, and create external markets for products. The program is in alignment with the government's policy of reducing dependence on the energy sector and further diversifying the economy. In 2013, the then Ministry of Trade, Industry and Investment sought to rationalize the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company, and as such indicated that the government was in collaboration with the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group to develop the appropriate regulatory and institutional framework for a new special economic zones in Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry of Trade and Industry is pursuing the establishment of this special economic zones regime, having had its draft policy approved by the Cabinet in 2017. The move towards this regime is in alignment with the Ministry of Trade and Industry's strategic goals of diversified and competitive businesses, increased investment, expanded and diversified regional and international trade. This is against the backdrop of the government's National Development Strategy 2016-2030, Vision 2030, in particular Theme 4, Growing Globally Competitive Businesses. The Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company remains in its current state and continues to operate in accordance with the governance framework as established under the State Enterprises Performance Manual. The Ministry of Trade and Industry is appreciative of the opportunity to participate in this session of the PAEC, and we look forward to the recommendations of the committee in keeping with this mandate. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And may I at this time invite the chairman or the CEO of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company to make a brief opening statement.
Good morning. Thank you again. The current three-member board of Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Corporation was appointed in May 2016, and at that time, encountered an organization with an approved structure and complement of 4 permanent staff members, though at the time the persons in employment were 3. The board was advised, as Trade would have just shared, that the ministry was well advanced in transforming the strategy and formation of the existing company from its current remit to a broader one, which would involve the implementation of the new special economic zone. As the PS would have indicated, this policy was approved in 2017. In light of this substantial impending change in scope, the current board had taken a conservative approach towards the running of the company and has focused on streamlining operations, cost savings, and maintenance of relationships with existing entities who had previously been designated free zone status. The board oversaw the annual audits of 2015, 16, and 17, and in an effort to maintain good corporate governance, streamlined operations, maintained alignment with the policies of the operations as outlined in the State Enterprises Monitoring Manual, and has maintained a profitable organization that has created well over 1,000 non-entry level jobs in the non-energy related sectors of the economy. The company is financially self-sustaining and pays dividends to central government every year. We are happy to be here to answer any questions put forward by this esteemed committee and look forward to your recommendations.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. Now, I would like to begin by clarifying a few matters, or having the Ministry of Trade and Industry clarify a few matters. Could you briefly state for this committee the reasons for the directive issued in 2016 and which was given by the ministry for no further expansion into the current program? Could you share with this committee the reasons for this directive?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think we may have to go back a little bit to 2013. In 2013, there was communication from the then Minister of Trade, Minister with responsibility for trade, speaking to the rationalization of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company. And in that correspondence, in 2013, as a review was being undertaken, the Free Zones Company was indicated that they should not engage in the recruitment of personnel and other aspects until further advised. Just to put in context that this was in fact a journey that started in 2011 with the World Bank report and its recommendations being issued in 2012. What the Ministry of Trade and Industry proceeded to do was to develop the, or build on the recommendations of that World Bank report. And one of the recommendations of the report, in fact, spoke to the importance of special economic zones regime because of some deficiencies that were identified in the current system. And so as the Ministry of Trade and Industry developed the special economic zones policy, which is now on our website, it was thought that from means of a transition, an efficient transition, that the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company should be careful, bearing in mind that there's a change that is due to come. I trust this might be able to clarify.
Does the ministry have or care to share with this committee any possible time frame for this change to come?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been a lot of success, I think we should recognize. The policy was developed. There was a lot of scrutiny, including with the private sector and, of course, interested stakeholders. It was approved by the Cabinet in 2017, and there is still a process that is ongoing, but we are really hoping that by September of this year, there would be even greater progress on this particular matter. We remain to be guided. I would not be able to say until receiving the mandate of the Cabinet.
Regime. Now, given that the free trade zones program is due to be replaced by the special economic zones regime, and that the company has a very small staffing infrastructure, and that the promotion of its services has been or is being conducted by another government agency, namely Invest TT. Could you tell us what support is being provided by the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company to both local and foreign investors enrolled and or interested in the free zone program? Could you share with us?
Invest TT is conscious of the move towards an SEZ, and it is my understanding that any discussions that they would be having with interested investors, they would be cognizant of that and share that information. I think what is also crucial is that the work of Invest TT is such that they are the investment promotion agency of Trinidad and Tobago and must make available all tools, all opportunities, and those can take a variety of different forms. It may be in the area of a free zone, as currently exists, because the current Free Zones Act has not been repealed, and as a result, what is remains. But there are also other aspects of interest that Invest TT has been exploring. There are industrial parks, for example, that Invest TT has also been promoting, and in that respect, they have in fact been actively looking at, for example, not just some of the 19 or so parks that currently exist, but also the Tamina Intech Park. They've recently closed a couple investments there, and other substantial local and foreign investments that they are looking at.
The special economic zones regime, is that to be driven by the TTFZ? Who is driving and attracting at the same time new investment opportunities within the framework of this new special economic zones regime? Is it the Ministry of Trade and Industry, or is it the Free Zones Company? We like to know, because I am not too clear in my mind.
Okay, the Special Economic Zones policy has been approved. But for it to be implemented, there needs to be a new Special Economic Zones Act and other activities that we will have to be guided on by the Cabinet. In terms of moving forward with the SEZ, once the legislation is in place, we would be aware as to the determination of the best framework for having the administrative support for the marketing, for other arrangements to be made in respect of the SEZ. So that is a work in progress. It's really very far advanced, and we have an intention to submit that for further guidance to the pertinent authorities within the next couple weeks. So we're quite hopeful that when that is done, we can speak at greater length and with more surety that this is where we are at. This is the framework, the legislative framework in which we are moving forward. And there's a good bit of cooperation between the Ministry of Trade and Industry and other pertinent authorities towards that end. And we're quite excited that that will, in fact, enhance the offerings that Trinidad and Tobago can make to foreign and local investors.
All right, before I continue, I'd like to ask Member Amrita, do you know right to come in at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the Free Zones Company, I have a quick question about this page 6 of your submission. Now, I see on page 6 of the submission, between the years 2014 to 2015, there was a decline in the revenue received from the Trinidad Free Zones Company enterprise. Can you indicate what would have attributed to this decline?
Thank you for the question. That decline was brought about primarily by the loss of one entity that was previously operating in the free zone. I would ask Ms. Samuel James if you would like to give you the name of the entity, but it was the loss of one company. Yeah? Would you like the name?
Yes, please.
At the end of 2015, the decline showed for the loss of Bredo and Shaw Middle East Limited. That company closed down, and therefore they are no longer operating under the free zone.
When did they close down?
That will have been in the year 2015.
What specific time? 2015 did it close? When? Was it in August of 2015? September? When?
I'm sorry, I don't have the exact date that they closed, but they were no longer operating within the free zone environment in the year 2015, so we weren't receiving any fees from them.
So that would have accounted for an approximate 30% decline in the revenue?
Yes, that would have accounted for that.
Looking at the period 2012 to 2014, I see that there was a fluctuation in the number of active free zones. It moved from 16 to 15, and then it increased to 18.
For those years in question, based on the document that we have before me, there were inclusion in 2015 of two free zone entities. Do I name the entities?
Yes, please.
They were Avasan Trinidad and Tobago Consulting Limited and Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited. They were included in 2015. If you go a little further back, in 2013, where we went from 15 to 18, we had Operations and Shared Services Company Limited, They came on in 2013. And 2012, we had Ollendorff Carriers, Trinidad and Tobago Limited. So those were the company that were onboarded onto the free zone system then.
Okay, thank you. Would you be so kind to submit those in writing as well, please?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Now, I'm looking at the employment by the enterprise, and I see that there has been a fluctuation, well, a significant increase in the number of employment. Can you indicate what policies would have been implemented to facilitate that increase in the employment by these enterprises?
Part of the onboarding process for gaining free zone designation ensures that a certain level of high quality jobs are created. So the main contributor to the fluctuation would have been the onboarding of additional companies into the free zone company.
Okay, thank you. I want to turn across to Permanent Secretary in Ministry of Trade. Now, I know the Special Economic Zone policy is still at its very early stages. However, I have two comments, and those are, when this policy is being created, I would like to recommend that focus be placed on determining the concentration of those companies that populate the special economic zones to ensure that they are in line with the country's comparative advantage, to ensure that we attain that level of diversification away from the energy sector that we are looking for. That is one recommendation or suggestion that can be taken into consideration. Also, I want to ask as well, but maybe it might be too early to ask, but I'm wondering about the integration of the special economic zone with the single electronic window system.
Thank you so very much, Senator, for your questions. Perhaps I'll ask Mr. Randall Karim, our Director of Policy, to speak specifically about the SEW. And we thank you very much for your comments, and we will take those on board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pierce. With respect to your first, or your suggestion or recommendation, that is in fact one of the core areas of the, in terms of realignment of the SEZ regime from the old free zone regime. If you look at when we undertook the review of the performance of the existing free zone regime, one of the observations we made, or rather that the World Bank made, was that the regime were not focused in promoting those levels of economic activities in specialized areas that were in alignment with the country's strategic development plan. So you would see that if you go to the SEZ policy, which is on the ministry's website, you would see that very clear realignment, where we're looking to promote and incentivize those areas of economic activity which is linked to the growth and the development of the non-energy sector. And in particular, those sectors that the government has identified under Vision 2030 as going to promote or certainly accelerate economic diversification. With respect to the integration of the SEZ regime with the single electronic window, again, part of the realignment in the new SEZ regime is enhanced reporting and monitoring of the activities that will take place within those, the special economic zones. The policy speaks to the use of information technology for those firms to be to report. So we would make it a mandatory requirement for the electronic filing of all of the annual returns and all of the relevant documentation that the new entities in the SEZ to be reporting utilizing the single electronic window.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. Now, I know you all referenced the World Bank report that identified the deficiencies with the free zone with the free zone model. Can you indicate some additional deficiencies that were also highlighted in this World Bank report?
Yeah, so as the Permanent Secretary indicated, this body of work actually began in the year 2011. As part of the portfolio of the then Ministry of Trade and Industrial Investment, we undertook a comprehensive review of all of the various institutional actors involved in trade and investment promotion to discern to what extent our existing arrangements were realizing the benefits that we had envisaged. The then Ministry of Finance invited the World Bank Group, specifically the International Finance Corporation, to look at the whole concept of the performance of the existing free zones regime, and in particular, how, to what extent that the regime had realized what was envisaged in the 1980s, because you would appreciate the economic underpinning of the free zone regime was a 1980s policy to promote exports through the use of these things called free zones. The World Bank made a number of observations. The first is what you astutely referred to in your recommendation, that while we had the free zones regime, there seemed to be no underlying economic strategy linked to how the free zone incentives or the existing free zones program was implemented. So a number of countries worldwide have sought to be very focused in their economic development agenda to incentivize very specialized areas of economic activity and ensure that whatever regulatory regime will link to those sectors. So one of the observations, as I said, that they thought that we had a free zones program, yet yes, while at Schedule 1 of the Act prescribed certain economic activities, it was very broad. And we needed to have a much more greater level of clarity and focus in those sectors that we were seeking to promote. The other areas of weaknesses related to the incentive arrangements. Part of the major deficiencies under the existing Free Zones Act was once a company has been designated an approved enterprise, the incentives that are in the legislation are granted in perpetuity. So the crafters of the legislation, I guess, in that dispensation, never, there's a sort of inability to roll back the incentives. That is the government, so the state's ability to roll back incentives once it's been given. Countries have looked at that and said, okay, this does not make sense, that your incentives should be tied to achieving certain economic targets, and that the whole concept of a company getting an incentive in perpetuity is not perhaps in the best interests of any country. So the World Bank highlighted the need for incentives to be very focused, time-bound, and linked to economic targets. The other weaknesses that the World Bank made was that the existing reporting requirements under the existing Free Zones Act was very weak, because when one, for example, when we were doing the review, we found that monitoring and reporting and compliance was very weak within the existing legislation. So it's really three broad areas. One is the incentives for architecture, the lack of focus within the existing free zones regime, and the inadequate institutional arrangements. And those are the three broad areas. I should say as well that part of the body of research that has been undertaken in the development of the new SEC policy was looking to what extent other countries have benefited or been far more successful than Trinidad and Tobago has been. Because basically every country in the world has some form of free zone program or special economic zones program. And we have seen from international comparisons countries being far more successful than we have been. And that, of course, obviously pivots us to look and examine, well, what are they doing that we are not doing right? And that was really the one of the underlying reasons to do a critical examination of the free zone regime in 2011 to 2013 and in crafting the new strategies in the context of the SEZ regime.
Okay, thank you very much. No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you kindly, Chairman. Madam P.S., I sat here and I listened to you. And it appears that the ministry is well on its way to creating a new platform from which to operate. And it clearly points to a strategic leadership being given in this regard. And I'm very impressed with regards to the work that is being done. I have listened and I have heard the chairman indicate that the company is a self-sustaining company. Not many companies come before this committee which are not a burden on the Treasury. I also heard the creation of over 1,000 jobs. To the chairman of the board, could you share with this committee how the company attained that self-sustaining level, and how did you go about the methodology in creating 1,000 jobs in our challenged economy?
Thanks for the question. The existing Trinidad and Tobago Free Zone Company and architecture is one that is set up to lend itself to self-sustaining performance and profitability from a purely business perspective. What the company has been able to do and continues to do is set quarterly fees in US dollars, mind you, at levels set, collect, and ensure that we earn fees at the correct level, very simply to cover the operating cost. And as we said previously, part of the mandate and part of the monitoring, however deficient it may have been in terms of the World Bank report, is to ensure that a certain minimum threshold of jobs are created and maintained. So part of our internal monitoring is to ensure that these jobs, we get that information quarterly, and just to keep the operations as tight as possible. We are a facilitatory body, as we are now. And bodies such as ours really ought not to have or require significant ongoing operational expenditure. So we've been able to maintain that, keep the fees coming in at the correct level, review the fee policies from during our tenure to ensure that we're not giving the thing away, and ensure that the jobs continue to be maintained at the required level, very simply.
But you spoke to the creation of 1,000 jobs.
Yeah.
How are those jobs spread?
The companies themselves are employers. So once a company is granted free zone status, they have to come to the table with a certain number of permanent employees that are going to form part of their operations going forward. So the free zones company indirectly supports, by granting the free zone status, we indirectly encourage external and local companies to set up and continue operations and produce and maintain the jobs.
Coming back to the permanent secretary, you spoke about the special economic zones policy being approved by Cabinet in 2017. Could you advise this committee whether or not the ministry has developed an implementation plan for that policy?
Yes, thank you very much, Minister, for the question. The ministry has, based on the Cabinet decision, moved forward with some consultations. Those consultations were with a variety of different agencies, public and private, including the chambers. We, the Bankers Association, we actually have been advised that we do need to ensure that the legislative framework is in place. So all of the work that's been done to date is feeding into the process towards that goal. And once that goal is achieved, we then would be able to implement. But we are of the view at the Ministry of Trade and Industry that we have moved as far as we can, perhaps about 95% in reaching that particular objective. And we are hoping shortly to seek the guidance of the Cabinet, the mandate of the Cabinet in moving forward with the legislative framework.
So is it that the ministry has in place some kind of framework timeline with regards to moving towards that legislative review?
We, at an international level, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has given a commitment of September of 2019.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Signore, how long have you been acting as Program Secretary in the Ministry?
Probably about 2.5 years.
2.5 years?
Possibly.
I must say that we do these meetings from time to time, and I finding some way to commend you for your presentation. I thought you were well prepared. I don't usually do this, but I just found that most of the questions I had, you sort of answered them before I asked them. So I want to, on behalf of this committee, commend you for preparing for this meeting in a way that answered most of my questions. Yes. The chairman, I'm looking at the organizational chart, and I see that other than the board of directors, you have CEO, administrative assistant, driver, clerk, accountant, clerical officer. But when I look at current executive management team, I'm seeing you have one position there. Tell me exactly what is happening now. You have one person employed? What is it? What is the situation?
Thanks for the question. The org chart as presented is the actual existing org chart, approved org chart. The number of persons employed presently at the company are 2. I will refer to the same correspondence that P.S. Signore would have quoted from when the company was written in 2013 by the Ministry of Trade and asked not to engage in the recruitment of personnel until further instructions were received from Trade in light of the impending changes coming with the Special Economic Zone policy. With that as a context, when the board took office in 2016, at that time we would have met 3 persons. One would have been a CEO who was on contract, an admin assistant also on contract, and a permanent member of staff, the accounting clerk. As those contracts came to an end between 2017 and 18, and in conjunction and in collaboration with Ministry of Trade, the company and the board took a decision to fill only one of the positions, but not pitched at the same level as the CEO, given the scaled down operations and the uncertainty going forward as to what shape and form the new enterprise would take.
Thank you, Mr. Foster Campos. Mrs. Critchlow, is there any question you'd like to raise?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Member Cummins, the Permanent Secretary would have answered a lot of the questions that I had. And one of the areas I wanted to look at was the whole human resources, but that has also been dealt with. In terms, though, of the daily operations of the organization, what are you guided by? Because I'm not seeing, I guess you wouldn't have a strategic plan given the state of flux that you are in, but what guides your operations on a daily basis?
Madam, sorry, I can't see your name from here, but I do recognize you. The board, on assuming duties in 2016, met a strategic plan in place, which was going to be concluded in 2017. We looked at that plan and we focused on all of the areas of implementation which were not achieved, and we brought those to fruition. From the other part of your question was, how do we?
What guides you in your daily operations?
We are guided by the State Enterprises Manual. We are guided by that, that strategic plan. We are also guided by the free zones policy, and because a lot of our interactions are with our the free zone businesses, and those interactions are prescribed by that policy document. So we have a number of areas of guidance in the operations.
Okay. In terms of Tobago, in your submission, I am seeing here that in 2015, the then CEO stated that insufficiencies in transport infrastructure, particularly port facilities in Tobago, limited the extent to which the company could be active there. So I wanted to know how well developed are free zones in Tobago, and to what extent have those deficiencies been addressed so that it would positively impact the operations in Tobago?
There has been in the last 2 odd years no specific focus on changing, altering the operations of the company vis-a-vis the impending changes. But what we can say is that the application for free zone status is equally available to any potential entity, whether that entity choose to operate in Tobago or in Trinidad. So there is nothing that precludes on any applications that come before the board would be considered in the normal course.
But is anything done to encourage these free zones of organizations to operate in Tobago?
The same level of incentives that exist as prescribed by the Act are available to any entity that chooses to operate in Tobago. So if an entity in Tobago saw the benefit to apply for free zone status in light of the existing incentives, there would be a consideration given. There has been that the Act does not prescribe for any special or different treatment to be given to entities that would be domiciled and operating in Tobago, mind you.
Okay, I understand that, but I was just wondering whether in the need, as with the creation of employment, if we felt there was need to have a special focus on Tobago and seek to encourage free zone companies to operate there.
Madam, the free zone company is a company in transition, as we would have been describing earlier on. So, and during this transition period, we are really holding for the advent of the new legislation, which will most probably change the direction of the company, so that between 2016 and this time, we have not actively pursued or promoted the companies into the free zone. But as the chairman explained, Tobago has not been excluded in any way. We should explain as well that the development of a free zone enterprise is very much a voluntary effort of companies who see that they have a business advantage by operating out of a free zone. So that we have not had, our investors tend to be large, sometimes multinational corporations who have the bulk, of business, and and can take advantage of free zone status.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. May I ask the following question? We know that the free zones enterprises are required to provide the free zones company with audited financial statements on an annual basis in accordance with your own guidebook. That is the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company Guidebook. All free zone enterprises apparently have followed the guidebook and have submitted their audited financial statements up to 2017, except, I don't know if this is a rogue one, the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited, which has not submitted the requisite statements since 2014. We are dealing with the accounts of this company for 2012 to 2014. You have submitted financial statements for 2012 to 2017. But there is an entity called the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited, which has not submitted the requisite statement. I want to ask the following question to the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company and the ministry through its acting permanent secretary. The following questions. What is the status of the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited audited financial statements since 2014? That's the first question. My second question on behalf of this committee, what measures have been implemented by the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company to secure provision of those financial audited statements from this company? And thirdly, what consequences, if any, are there for free zone enterprises failing to comply with the requirement as outlined in the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Guidebook? Those are my three questions on behalf of this committee. as it relates to this entity called the Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited. Madam Chair, you can start, and then I'll ask the Permanent Secretary to tell us what's going on.
Okay. I would start by saying that it is no small feat that we've been able to achieve a 95% compliance rate based on the existing members and operating entities in the Free Zone Company. That has not happened by chance. That has been the outcome of concerted follow-up efforts on behalf of the company in the usual escalating manner. The initial telephone call, the visit, the meeting, the write, the letters. We have not had success with Trinidad and Tobago Fine Cocoa Company Limited, despite continued documented follow-up with them. For the record, we will add that the company's fees are current, notwithstanding the fact that they are in breach of a compliance regulation to provide the audited accounts. In terms of inducements, further inducements, the company has a policy whereby after certain time periods have lapsed and the company is deemed to still be recalcitrant, which they are, fines, we will have written them already. Ms. Samuel can confirm, advising of penalties and fines that are applicable in light of their breach.
Yes,
And I mean, to be abundantly clear, should there not be any traction, we do have the recourse of going to the courts, which we have done for previous miscreant entities.
But what time frame, Madam Permanent Secretary, is an entity provided? Because remember, this entity that is in the free trade zone is given a lot of incentives, doesn't pay taxes, or whatever arrangement. You will be able to come into that question in a short while, in terms of revenues foregone by the people of Trinidad and Tobago to allow these companies to operate. But they must operate in accordance with the law. And if they have a duty to submit their financial audited statements, and this company has refused to do it, and I compliment the chairman on the 95% achievement. What sanctions exist within a time frame? 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. 4 years, this company has not complied. What sanctions have been imposed on this company to get in line, or you take action to get it out? What action? They cannot be enjoying all these benefits and you cannot monitor their finances. You need to monitor their finances. That is what these statements do when they are prepared and sent to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. A very pertinent question. We at the Ministry of Trade and Industry would rely on the board to follow up on a matter such as this and take some of the steps that were outlined. And I believe the penalties are still in the Free Zones Act. Regrettably, I don't have that right before me. But we are very concerned that there are such breaches. We note the action taken to date. We will continue to work with the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company, urging for the next steps to be taken in accordance with the Free Zones Act. It's unfortunate that it has reached to this stage, and Mr. Chairman, I think you have hit the nail on the head in terms of the very generous benefits that are currently in trade. So we would, again, want not to overstep our boundaries by taking on the work of the board, but we would be urging swift action.
Well, may I, on behalf of this committee, request that within 2 weeks, we are given written correspondence from the Free Trade Zones Company and the ministry as to what specific steps will be taken to get this company in line and to give them a deadline for submitting their financial audited statements for 2014 right up to 2018 fiscal year in terms of year. We'd like to have something in writing submitted to this committee in the next 2 weeks, outlining what steps are being taken to rectify this serious deficiency that has occurred in the free zone under the supervision of both the Free Zone Company and the Ministry of Trade. That cannot continue. The other area I'd like to go to is this. How does the Free Zone Company, the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zone Company, financially scrutinize these enterprises to which it grants free zone status without examining any of the audited financial statements it receives from them? We have in your written submission, which is amazing, I must tell you, Permanent Secretary and Chairman, that the system that is in place at the Free Zone Company is this. You do not analyze these financial statements that are submitted to the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company from the entities that are in the free zone, because you rely, that is the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company, rely on the integrity of such reports without the need for further examination. Now, explain that to this committee and to Trinidad and Tobago. You have a duty to examine financial audited reports so that nobody will be underreported. So when you submit these financial statements, they are a true reflection of the reality taking place in the free zones. How can you and the external auditors provide this Parliament and the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade with a proper financial statement if the Free Zones Company is taken for granted and accepting these reports on the integrity, in inverted commas, of the companies that are submitting those reports? I would like that to be clarified for this committee. It does not make sense to this chairman. I am confused.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the written response indicates that only audited financial statements prepared by certified auditors in Trinidad and Tobago are accepted by the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones. As such, an audited statement, a statement which is accepted and not qualified by an auditor operating under the laws and practicing under the laws and regulation of Trinidad and Tobago, these are the reports we accept. And this is why we say that we can rely on the integrity of such reports, because these auditors are qualified and certified and they look at the financial statements of the companies that we are operating with. And because we only accept audited financials, we feel comfortable relying on the integrity of the auditor's report itself.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
I want to tell you, Mrs. Esther Lesha, you
I'm
are
not
a
the chair,
director.
sir. I'm just the director. I'm not the chair.
No, what I'm saying,
Yes.
as a director,
Yes.
as chairman of this committee, it is totally unacceptable for a company, even though you have certified accounts from those companies that operate in the free zones, you have a duty under the Companies Act of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. You have a duty under the State Enterprises Monitoring Enterprises Performance Manual to analyze those reports so that you can be convinced that what is in those reports really and genuinely reflect what is stated. If you just take those reports on face value and you pass on those reports to your external auditors without scrutinizing them properly, the external auditors will take those reports and so reflect in his or her final reports. This is what we have before us. So I'm asking, in accordance, if that is a practice, I believe it's a practice that we need to review.
Accounts might be a little mix-up. I don't think those accounts have to go to the external auditors of the free zone company.
No.
These are accounts for the companies functioning within the free zone. And I suspect they're attempting to see whether they are reporting accurately and so forth. In addition to which, Chairman, I'm not sure that based on the org structure that they have the capacity internally to do that sort of assessment of the audited financial statement. That
No, I understand. I understand. Yes.
Chairman, I think what is required here, I don't think, and I would invite the acting director of the investment committee if I were you, Chair, but I don't think one can fault the rationale offered where you have certified audited accounts. You not perusing it in the sense. But what I would want to get is whether or not the free zone company, whether they look at the recommendations made by the auditors, because once your accounts are certified, if there are any anomalies or weaknesses in the operations of the company, your management letter tells the company you need to look at A, B, C, and D. You need to strengthen, you need to tweak here, you need to tweak there. I share the view that is being expressed that there is no need to robustly go into the accounts. You can accept the integrity because the auditing is done by a certified accountant. But to my mind, the free zone should look at whether or not the management company letter is accompanied with the accounts and what that management letter says about the operations. I think that's the guideline for the board.
Like to respond?
Yes, Chair. As the Honorable Minister and the other Senator explained, the accounts of the companies that are part of the free zone, they are separate entities from the free zone. They produce their financial statements. Their financial statements will then, as required by law, be audited by certified auditors. These auditors, as long as the auditors give an unqualified audit opinion. That means that the opinion that the external auditor gives indicates to any user of those accounts that the financial statements are free of any material error. If there are minor errors, those errors would be provided in a management letter, as the minister indicated, which will be supplied to the company itself. It does not form part of the financial statements. What forms part of the financial statements are the statements of the company and the audit opinion, which precludes the financial statements. And this is why, with all due respect, we indicate that by law, we are not doing anything differently to, let's say, the banks or anywhere else. When you have audited financial statements, as opposed to unaudited, because some people provide, we don't accept unaudited financial statements. We accept only those that have been properly perused by a certified auditor. And therefore, we, like a bank or any other financial institution, we rely on those statements. But I do agree with you that there is room for further analysis of even the financial statements as we see it, so that we can see trends in the company's operations, whether there's growth, whether we see something strange happening. The board and the management of the TT free zones will look at those statements to see what they tell us about the future of the organization. But at the end of the day, the provision of those statements do not impact the fee paid by the organization, because these tend to remain fixed throughout the operational life, of the organization. We do hope that in the future, some of the changes that would come with the introduction of the special economic zone would be able to give us that flexibility to review, fee structures should the financial circumstances of organizations, as you can see from the financial statements, if there are material changes in the operations of an organization, we will be able to make, some recommendation with respect to the fee structure.
May I ask, do you ask for management letters from these entities?
No, we don't.
We don't?
No, because the management letter is not usually, it's not at all an external document. It is a hint it is observations by the external auditor to the head of finance of that particular company, which would say, we would like to see you tighten up on this policy, or, there's something happening with your assets, the tagging is not complete or something, those are the kinds of things. But they are usually not material flaws in the financial statements. So as long as the auditor is prepared to give an unqualified report, we feel happy supporting it.
May I ask another question? How, and maybe Chairman can answer, how does the company, as a free zones company, go about evaluating the performance of the entities that are in the free zone? Do you know why this particular entity left, which seemed to be a very, that entity that left appears to me used to make a very serious contribution, but it has disappeared, it has gone. Now, we haven't asked you yet why that company left. So I'm just asking for clarification. How do you go about evaluating the performances of entities under the free zones regime?
In terms of financial performance, we would, as Ms. Lejar would have explained, we would place reliance on the audited unqualified statements presented, because we believe that these represent a very fair and unbiased and independent reflection and certification of the bona fide of the financial performance of the entities. We also do obtain from them quarterly updates on employees, number of persons employed, which we monitor to ensure that there is no significant, certainly no significant negative deviation in those statistics. We ensure that site visits are performed by members of the company, management of the company, however small the team is, just to get a sense that there is in fact genuine economic activity taking place at these companies.
You said that you look at in terms of evaluating the performance, you look at the audited statements, huh?
Well, I said that there are several different, performance is measured in many different ways, one of which is financial performance. So,
right, and you look at it.
Yes.
Okay. Share with this committee in the absence of an internal auditor or an internal audit unit, this is directed at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. How does the ministry ensure the effectiveness of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company? They don't have an internal auditor. They don't have an internal unit, which is something I will come to in a short while. How, therefore, would the ministry go about ensuring the effectiveness of this company?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We recognize that this is a lean machine, if you like, but there are certain aspects that we expect and we observe that these aspects are in train. So, for example, there is, if I'm not mistaken, an internal audit, an audit committee of the board. We also receive from the company audited financial accounts. Those are also reviewed, and of course that forms part of our submission to the cabinet and then subsequently to the parliament. Right now we take on board the new board since coming in 2016. They are seeking to put a lot of systems in place, bearing in mind that they are somewhat stymied in terms of the institutional capacity that they do have, but from a management point of view, and even from a board point of view, we're really looking at 3 members as against what I think is normally a larger cohort of board members. But ultimately, one relies on the audit committee. We also rely on their audited financial statements, and those, of course, are submitted subsequently.
Could you give us the names of the 3 members? We know we have the chairman here. Who are the other 2 members?
Yes, all 3 are here this morning. The chairman, who is Mrs. Yes,
right,
Mrs. Tom Ujadi.
So these are the 3.
We have also Ms. Lejean and Ms. Sharon Mohammed from the Ministry of Finance.
Right. Could you tell us who formed this audit committee? This audit committee is formed by the 3 persons who are here.
Okay. The chairman will respond, or Mr. Jean.
Mr. Chairman, I chair the Audit Committee, and I'm supported by the Consultant Administration. And Ms. Mohammed just joined us 1 month ago, and she will be co-opted to that committee as well. I should say that originally, Mr. Punnett, who unfortunately deceased, was also a member of that committee.
Madam Permanent Secretary, when is this, the membership of the board, seeing that it falls under your purview? Do you have any idea when it will be expanded? Because I find it very strange that since 2016, we have only 3 members. And I know Mr. Wayne Punnett very well. May his soul rest in peace. He would have been a director as well, but he has passed on.
He has indeed.
And there has been no replacement for Wayne.
Yes, Ms. Sharon Mohammed has replaced.
So there was always 3 members?
Yes.
What steps are being taken to address that situation in terms of the membership? I know 3 is a quorum, right?
Yes.
There's
2 is a quorum. 2 is a quorum.
2 is a quorum. But under the Act, how many members are supposed to be on the board?
I think we
Not
have
more
10.
than...
The bylaws do allow for a maximum of 10.
10.
No minimum advised by the chair of the company has been set.
Now, will any steps be taken by the ministry? I want to tell you, it is a very unusual situation for a company to be relying on a board. The board must have its audit committee, that's fine. But the board cannot be responsible for auditing the accounts of the company. You need an internal auditor who will be independent. These board members have been appointed. You want an internal auditor who is independent. That is the key operating word. Now the question here, when is the ministry going to take steps to ensure that there is an independent internal auditor on the staff of the Free Zones Company? I don't think you could get away from that. They spend, this company actually receives, based on fees, about $3.2 million. They expend roughly about just under $2 million in expenses every year. About 1.7, I just round it off to 2. So even though you have a small staff of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, you need to have an internal audit function. Unless I have to be advised by the Auditor General on this matter. Because I find it strange that we can just continue without an internal audit unit. Or if not, just an auditor. You don't have to have a unit, an internal auditor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, very pertinent points. I think just a glance at the current org chart, there's no provision for that. But this is a golden opportunity to move beyond the audit committee structure that currently is in place. As indicated earlier, we're looking towards the next few months to merge into to transition. Again, we have to be guided by by the executive. But perhaps, based on your particular recommendation, that might be one of the aspects that can be looked at in terms of whatever body, whatever framework, whatever administrative structure is put in place. As it currently stands, we do rely on what exists, but your point is very well taken, and I think we will to bring that to the powers that be. It would be really at a level beyond ourselves to make the final determination as to increasing the number of members on the board. And we can consult and provide some sort of feedback in terms of what the thinking is at that level.
May I ask the investments division, give us some guidance, because you oversee all these state enterprises. What is your advice to this committee as it relates to the absence of an internal auditor and an internal audit function, and the work of internal auditing is being conducted at the moment by members of the board, and that is then used as a basis for submitting to the ministry, and I'm sure assisting the external auditor. Could you tell us what is the practice and what would you recommend in these circumstances?
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Finance and Investment Division is in support of an internal audit. It is outlined in the State Enterprise Performance Monitoring Manual, and it is also reinforced in the Companies Act. So the internal audit department is critical as far as the investments is concerned. So we strongly recommend that the company set up an internal audit.
Permanent Secretary, I hope that you'll take it on board. We'll be writing as a committee to you and to the Free Zones Company to take immediate steps to address this deficiency in the operations of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones. I think that you have been operating like this for, is it the last, how long you are without an internal auditor, Madam Chair, of, is it 3 years now?
From inception in 1988.
We never had an internal?
The structure has never accommodated for one.
That is amazing.
May I approach the Chair?
Yes, Madam.
May I speak? I want to begin by saying the board accepts the recommendation for stronger controls, and I appreciate that the question comes from a place where the Chair, I hope I understand you, is looking at the internal operations of the free zones. When we say that the internal audit function, we have to look at this in terms of the size of the organization. And it is, I wouldn't say an easy operation, but the audit committee of the board has put in place a number of controls. And just to be clear, the internal audit function is not a financial audit function. The Chair would note that since 2016, and certainly prior to that, the Free Zones has always had good, clear, unqualified financial audits. So this is an assurance that we have been operating again with full integrity, with nothing that comes to the attention of an external auditor to suggest that there's any financial impropriety of any kind, I believe, but the internal auditor is more of a process auditing to ensure that policies are in place, that policies are being adhered to, that systems and process. This is the function of internal audit. It does not audit the financial statements of the company. We do hear you, and it is our intention. We understand that certain other organizations who, like us, are small, have hit upon a solution of outsourcing an internal function, to support. And we are looking at that, and we can certainly implement this very quickly.
No, I don't know to what extent the Investments Division, Ministry of Finance, or the Ministry of Trade and Industry can help the Free Zones Company in terms of the audit function whilst you are seeking to outsource. Maybe they have some extra resources.
An internal
yes, they might be able to second somebody from the Ministry of Trade and Industry or from the Ministry of Finance Investments Division whilst you are seeking to either outsource or to actually have on your establishment an internal auditor. However you all decide that. The reality is it must be done. That is the problem. Cannot continue how it is going. And it's an oversight that this thing has been going on for all these years. And nobody, and Mrs. Elisha, no one is questioning at all anybody's integrity. So I wanted to make that very clear. We just want to be clear that in terms of the State Enterprises Performance Manual and the Companies Act of Trinidad and Tobago, an internal audit function is absolutely essential for any company. It's either you remain alive or you die. The company cannot say, we have 2 persons or 3 persons, and then you can't have an internal function. It can't operate like that. We either do it properly or we don't do it. So I just wanted to make that point very clear. Another area I want to clarify as we move on is this. Could the Permanent Secretary tell this committee what is the total revenue foregone? Or what is the total foregone revenue for the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago as a result of the program's incentives for each year, 2012 to 2017? Can you provide that for us in writing so that we will have an idea of what the state and Trinidad and Tobago is actually foregoing in exchange for these companies in the free zones?
We'd be pleased to get that information to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, and at the same time, while you are getting that information to this committee, could you indicate to us to what extent is this foregone revenue offset by the benefits of the program? So we want to know if that program is making sense or whether we should continue with the program. So we need to know the revenue foregone as opposed to the benefits in dollars and cents. And I wanted to ask the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones whether there are any plans and what are your plans. You see, Cabinet has approved the special economic zone regime since 2017. We are now in March of 2019. The Free Zone Company is operating under law, an act. The question here is that whilst we are waiting the final push, we have to continue to function. How does the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zone plan to increase revenue in the short and medium term? Or is the company, you cannot, or are you on a freeze, literally, this company? Or is there any intention in the medium or short term to address this question?
Well, I mean, I will attempt to answer the question with focus on the short term, defining short term as within a 12-month period, given what Trade would have shared with the committee about the intended time frames for operationalization of the special economic zone. The company has not actively been soliciting new applicants, new registrants to the free zone system. However, when from time to time suitable applications are made to the company, they are assessed and treated with in a professional manner and in accordance, as you correctly said, with the existing legislation. So there has not been an active push in light of the impending very short-term change. We didn't think it was prudent because in all likelihood, the new incarnation is going to be different and look different and operate differently. But any applicants, any inquiries made are dealt with. There has never been the conversation or communication from the company to potential investors that we are not open for business, far from so.
Madam Chairman, you are very frank lady, and I would like to ask, frankly speaking, do you believe that the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company will be closed and a new entity will replace it? Hence the reason at this time everything is being done tentatively, because this TNT Free Zones Company is about to go out of existence and a new entity replace, to have it replaced?
No information to suggest that has been communicated with the company. So as at this point, I would say that there has been nothing to suggest that.
Any other member would like to? If no other member, may I also raise, I guess the strat plan is part of that whole arrangement too, because you cannot really go into the future when you're uncertain or you're trying to determine your future.
That's correct.
Mrs. Critchlow, you have any final questions? Mr. Foster? Okay, thank you. Well, I would like to bring the proceedings to close at this time. And before doing so, I would like to call on the permanent secretary, acting, in the Ministry of Trade and Industry to make brief closing remarks, to be followed by the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company. So, Madam Permanent Secretary, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we do want to express our deep appreciation to be able to participate in this session and to glean from yourself and the other distinguished members of the committee some very key perspectives and issues for immediate attention, which we guarantee will be followed up. In particular, we take note of the issues of interest, such as the need, as Senator Dunerai indicated, for a clear determination of the companies coming into the new regime, Minister Critchlow Coburn's emphasis on employment generation for example, Tobago, and of course job creation remains a key objective of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. We've also taken on board the request, Mr. Chairman, that you've asked for written communication on some very key pivotal matters concerning the operationalization of the the operations of the company. And I also would not want to end without responding to Senator Foster Cummins' comment earlier on, and to say this is really Team MTI, Ministry of Trade and Industry, working together with Team TTFZ, all towards Team T and D. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair.
What could you say after that? No, I mean, the board, however small, has taken our responsibilities seriously, has enjoyed working closely with Team MTI in furtherance of the Special Economic Zone policy. We do see it as an important impetus for propelling the country forward. And we too have taken note of the deliverables coming out of the queries and concerns raised by the committee. Thank you.
Well, thank you so very much. And before we end, may I, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, record our thanks to members of the officials, I should say, from the Investment Division, Ministry of Finance, the officials who came from the Ministry of Trade and Industry, led by the Permanent Secretary, and the officials who came from the Trinidad and Tobago Free Zones Company, led by its chairman. I'd like to thank the public for listening, the media for covering the proceedings. I would now like to adjourn this meeting. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.